Point shoes have a satin on them, and many of the same rules apply to what we talked about yesterday with our ballet flats. You can do the pancake method and colorize them. You can dye these different colors. There's a lot of options. I've seen some glitter them or add rhinestones, so you can get pretty crafty with your point shoes. Point shoes have to be unique for you. They need to be altered. They are not a one size fits all type thing. It I kind of equate it to finding that magical wand. So some dancers need to adjust the shank. I adjust my shanks based on what I'm doing. So if I need a softer shank because I'm doing more jump work than being on my toes, I may want a softer shank so that way it's just more pliable. I If I'm doing like more turns and like fancy little footwork things, I may want a 3/4 shank. In which case you peel back and the shank board is right inside. You can peel that back and you can cut it off depending on how hard it is would determine if you can do it with like a cardboard cutter or if you can do it with a knife. I always keep a multi-tool knife on me for things like that if I need to do that ahead of time. The box also needs to be broken in. You cannot do this cold though, so you need to warm up the shoe. I will oftentimes suggest to my dancers that you get it warm with body heat so you can like hold it. I'll even encourage that they'll sit on it for a little while. I've seen some dancers use a hair dryer, but the thing is you can overheat it. So until you're far more experienced with your shoes, I really don't suggest that method. But you want to ease and break in the box of the shoe. You also want to make sure that the side is broken in as well so it's pliable and it melds to your foot. When you get this on your foot, I'll even suggest that you take a spray bottle of water and dampen the sides so it conforms right up against your foot. Same goes for the heel. If you get that damp, you'll find that the material just snugs up right up against your heel. There should be no excess material. It should not be bunchy. Some dancers have had to add in like heel grips in the back of the shoe because their foot was shaped differently. And again, we don't want any slack in that material. So you do have to adjust a little bit based on your needs. With point shoes, you always attach your own ribbons. Like I said yesterday, you have to be a little bit careful in where you're stitching stuff. Now, I'm not going into the whole logistics of how you attach them today. I'm going over the general rule of thumb, but I'm not going to sit here sewing them just yet. So, when you take your shoe, you should be able to fold it in at the heel. This should put you for where that ribbon that goes around your ankle, that goes into that groove. That's where it should sit flat. Next to that, this is where I suggest my new demi-point dancers, new point dancers, this is where I suggest that they start practicing sewing their elastics. From there, when you know what your foot specifically needs, then you can adjust. There's different ways to attach elastics to your point shoes. So next to the ribbon, I ask the elastic to go, and it just sits right next to it in there. The same rule applies to your ballet flats. You should be able to have that heel fold in. You would see where that ribbon would have gone, and then you bring that in. The other way to work with the canvas shoes is you actually just tuck it back and do about 1.5 finger distance to the elastic, because you want the elastic pulling from the back of the heel. That same concept can actually happen with your point shoes as well, where you go for the back of the heel and pull the elastic forward further. When you do go to sew these in, you want to make sure that you are following the seams. Now, there are drawstrings, be it in your point shoes or your ballet flats, there are elastic drawstrings that go through the heel of your shoe. You do not want to sew those in. So you want to make sure that you're following exactly on the stitching of the shoe when you go to sew. Some dancers will do a box stitch below so that they have extra support in there. Given what I was doing with these shoes, I didn't need that. I just followed the seam, and that way I didn't have to worry about the excess being in my foot. Another thing, with the drawstring, be sure not to pull these out. I have had so many dancers who have gone, Miss Christy, please help, because they'll get a little overzealous about pulling on them and the whole thing will come out. Don't do that. They are gnarly to feed back through. It is not fun. So there's that. Next, also, I do not suggest knotting your point shoes or your ballet flats for that matter. If you're dancing for like several hours, your feet can sometimes swell. And so when you go to put them in, sometimes the next day, or even if you have to adjust them during a break time, you don't want to be knotted into your shoe. Sometimes, even though it's an elastic, you may need to give yourself a little bit of forgiveness in there. So I always suggest classic bow tie. Cross it, pull it through, tuck it in. You can cut the excess off if there's a crazy amount. Like I said, we should never see the drawstring, but you also don't want to cut it off so short that you have problems with maintaining the drawstring elasticity on your foot. Next, we have the sole. Just like I mentioned before, you can use a shoe scruffer to get that scruffed up. There's also rosin. I personally carry rosin in a small container with me because you never know. Now, not all studios permit you to use rosin. You can also use some really awesome hairspray, and that can work. But again, you have to check with the studio to make sure that that is a permittable use. When we talk about the box now, the part that we stand on, some dancers will cut the satin off so you get to the canvas underneath. If you do that, you want to make sure you burn it. So when you're talking about your point shoes, you want to be able to have matches or a lighter. Obviously, for our youth, we talk about this with their parents and make sure that they do get approval for that, because you need to be able to singe off the ends on your ribbons, and you need to be able to singe off the ends if you do take the satin off the box. I've seen dancers try to use some of the phrase stopping items to stop it, and quite frankly, it just does not do the same level of work as burning it does. The burn melts it, so that way it just does not fray. There are also adhesives that you can purchase that are specifically for your dance shoes, specifically your point shoes. And due to brand logistics, I am not going to specify which one it is, but we do carry them. If you need to glue, the adhesive does great for re-strengthening if there's any dead spots in your shoe. Now, it's not a permanent solution. If your shoe is dead, your shoe is dead. But it can sometimes hold you out a little bit longer before you would have to completely say bye-bye to your shoe. It can also do wonders for getting the insert tacked back down if you had to rip that out for any reason. Some of us just even rip that out and don't even bother with it. So when you're going on demi-point or point, and sometimes certain dancers need it for hip-hop or tap, we have to also maintain what's happening internally in those shoes. So we have an option is lamb's wool. Now for my dancers who are allergic to this, I've actually suggested that you use like the stuffing that they sell in like craft stores. So you can pull that apart. Obviously, you need to look and make sure you don't have allergies to that either. But you have a bit more play with this, so you can adjust it to your foot. You can also get lamb's wool pads. There are also just standard gel pads. And again, you need to pick and choose what is appropriate for you, but this goes with your shoe maintenance. You need to make sure that you are maintaining this with the shoes that you are using so you can dance appropriately. I will see you tomorrow as we talk about tap shoes. I will see you then.